What is channeling? What are the forms of channeling? What does it look like for you?
Well, at a basic level, you could argue that we're all channeling in so many ways, so many times. So, for example, you could be channeling your intuition or channeling a very wise part of yourself. So in a way, channeling is when you let a certain energy, or in some cases, entity or guide, have the focus of your voice, your attention, your actions. So, for example, musicians and artists and acts of creativity, you can feel that you get into a channeling flow. Your mind is no longer in charge, is no longer in control. There's something else coming through you that feels a bit more spiritual and a bit more open in nature. But I think the traditional view of channeling, or certainly for our generation right now, the way that we tend to associate the word channeling has been somebody is letting the voice of a spirit, a guide, an entity, an energy come through them and connect us to information and vibration from the realm of spirit rather than the realm of human.
Welcome. My name is Sahara Rose, and this is the Highest Self podcast, a place for you to discuss what makes you your soul's highest development. If it's your first time listening, welcome. I am so grateful to be reconnected with you in this lifetime. And if you're here every week, this is an episode you are going to love. So this podcast is all about making spirituality modern, fun, grounded, relatable. What I really found missing in the spiritual space when I created this podcast over 5 years ago was that a lot of times spirituality is all about ascending and connecting to your star family and leaving the body. But to me, what really matters is how I'm going to integrate this work into this human experience. How am I going to cultivate more joy, more peace, more understanding, and really take my life experiences and bring them towards my dharma, my soul's purpose, the big reason why I'm here. And that's why I wrote my book, Discover Your Dharma, with foreword by Deepak Chopra, which is all about you tuning into your energetic frequency, your soul's fullest expression, because your purpose is not just what you do, but really it's who you are. And it's, again, that energetic signature that you bring to every conversation, every project that you work on, everywhere. It's who you be. So throughout my spiritual journey, I realized one of my greatest gifts is channeling. And channeling to me feels like a connection to source, my highest self, something that is beyond me, but still a part of me. And for me, it comes in receiving a download. So a download feels like a whole stream of ideas of consciousness that are coming through me that feel like, again, they're coming from this bigger source. So it's not really coming so much from my ego mind of like how to, but rather it's big ideas and inspiration. And sometimes it's moving so fast, it's hard for me to even write it down or speak it out. And I share a lot of my channeling during my solo casts here on this podcast. And throughout my journey of recognizing that channeling was one of my gifts, I started to look up channels on YouTube. And that's how I found Lee Harris many years ago. And I just loved his like empathetic, loving, peaceful, serene aura. And I also really resonated with his channels. And I would find often that the very same things that I was channeling, especially forecasts for the month, were the same that he was channeling. And I felt that we were tuning into the same source energy. So for many years, I've been listening to his energetic forecasts, and I'm so excited today to have him here on the podcast to talk about his journey with channeling, how it opened up for him. We talk about his relationship to his guides, the Z's that he channels. I ask him questions about how do we know if we're channeling? What does it feel like? What is the difference between our conscious mind and our channeling soul selves? And how can we feel that energetic shift that happens? And then we talk about his new book, Conversation with the Z's. And we speak about the new human soul and how this soul is shifting and evolving from the old paradigm and what this really means for us. We discuss how laughter is so powerful. I read something that he had channeled about laughter, and I ask him about how we can tune into this energy even more. We discuss the power of dreams. And I really love this part of the conversation because oftentimes you talk about dreams and it's really about like interpreting your dreams. And if you see this, if you're falling, if your teeth fall out, like this is what it means. But what he channeled about dreams was actually something totally different about the state of consciousness we are at and physically where we are at when we are dreaming. So this is something that I know you're going to find interesting because I had never heard someone express it in this way. And for many of us, for me, I get some of my greatest downloads through my dreams. So it was really interesting to hear what the Z's said about dreams and how our auras move in and out of our bodies. So I know you're really going to be interested in hearing that part of the conversation at the end. So even just being in this energy, I felt even more expansive and radiant and peaceful. And you're really going to be sitting with us in this frequency. And I hope you allow yourself to just fully receive the transmission that this conversation is. Sometimes a conversation is the most potent form of medicine that you can receive because it opens up our possibilities of what we can perceive in our realities. And that's really what awakening is all about. So beyond the words that we say in this conversation, I invite you to open up to the energetics that you are receiving and then see what comes through. Maybe you'll start channeling right after this and share with me over on Instagram what transmissions you receive. So Lee Harris, he is an incredible channel, intuitive, psychic, medium, and author. And I'm so excited to welcome him here on the Highest Self podcast. So without further ado, let's get into the conversation. So there's a lot of talk about morning routines. And if I have to be honest, there is one practice that I really stick to every single day. It's my non-negotiable, and that is breath work. It really just helps me open up the channels in my body and allow me to receive more creativity, insight, which really supports me in my dharma. And I have been loving the app Open. I actually had the founder Manoj here on the Highest Self podcast. Incredible episode. I'll link it below. And this app is really just a modern approach to breath work. I mean, picture doing breath work to Berlin house music and you basically got the vibe. And I also love that they have meditation and movement classes and it's all under 10 minutes. So I love doing their breath work in the morning, but also their sleeping breath work at night because it really just helps me calm my mind. So they're actually giving Highest Self podcast listeners 30 days free. So you can head over to withopen.com/Sahara. Again, that's withopen.com/Sahara to get your 30 days free. And you can find that link in the show notes. And I'm super excited to see you in class. Welcome, Lee, to the Highest Self podcast. It's so great to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's lovely to be with you and to meet you for the first time.
Yes. And the first question I have for you is, what makes you your highest self?
Oh, well, I would say first thing, it's a boring answer maybe, but the effect of channeling. So I think channeling has been for me the doorway to living more in my highest self more of the time. Not all of the time, because I'm human and I'm going through the ups and downs and the lessons and the growth. But I would say the effect of channeling. And then on a human level, it's usually music, love, connection, any of those things.
Well, I adore your monthly forecasts that you share on YouTube. I've been listening to them every month for years now. And so often I actually go back sometimes to the one from the month before to be like, oh, like, and I'm like, wow, so many of the things really came through. And also I feel like I get a lot of the same hits. Like we're definitely both on the joy wave, the laughter wave, the music wave. So I'm like, yes, we're definitely channeling a lot of these things from that same source. So it's so beautiful to have you here. Now, for someone who's heard the word channeling and they might have this, maybe this conception of, oh, channeling means you're like out of your body and it's this alien coming through you and then you don't remember it after. What is channeling? What are the forms of channeling? What does it look like for you?
Well, at a basic level, you could argue that we're all channeling in so many ways, so many times. So for example, you could be channeling your intuition or channeling a very wise part of yourself. So in a way, channeling is when you let a certain energy, or in some cases, entity or guide, have the focus of your voice, your attention, your actions. So for example, musicians and artists and acts of creativity, you can feel that you get into a channeling flow. Your mind is no longer in charge, is no longer in control. There's something else coming through you that feels a bit more spiritual and a bit more open in nature. But I think the traditional view of channeling, or certainly for our generation right now, the way that we tend to associate the word channeling has been somebody is letting the voice of a spirit, a guide, an entity, an energy come through them and connect us to information and vibration from the realm of spirit rather than the realm of human.
And when we are channeling, do we have to know who we're connecting to? Is it possible to be channeling and not knowing that you are channeling?
There's a couple of ways I look at it. So, for example, for me, I heard the voice of my guides when I was 23 years ago. And it wasn't something I was looking for. It wasn't something I expected. And like many people, I thought for that to happen to me, there must have been something extraordinary about me, or I should have been meditating for 3 years and I should have only been on a raw diet. I had all these preconceptions about why channeling would happen to someone. So when it happened to me, and when it happened to me on a subway train of all places, it was hard to believe, because I thought, well, no, surely big spiritual experiences happen in a monastery. But you see, for me, what I often teach and explain to people is some of us may end up channeling our guides, talking to our guides, connecting with our guides, but all of us can connect with our higher self, which is why I love the name of your podcast. So my advice to people who want to channel is don't get too obsessed with trying to find a particular angel or a particular group of beings. Just ask yourself to go above and beyond and outside your mind, your existing view and perception of the world, and ask to speak to the voice of your soul or your higher self. So I will always say, as a great starting point, write down on a piece of paper or type, what does my soul want to tell me today? And then write what comes, and don't judge it, don't control it, just let it come through. And hey, if you're worried you're imagining it, fine. Just let yourself imagine it and let it happen. And what I've noticed with so many people that I've led through that exercise at workshops or online, many people will go, oh my God, I think I've kind of done this before when I'm journaling, but I didn't realize it was channeling. So in answer to your question, I actually think our higher mind and higher knowledge and higher senses are available to us in many different ways in our life, and they show up in many different ways and at different times. We're just not always used to tracking them, and we certainly as a society don't talk about it, or historically we haven't.
Totally. I feel like those moments where you feel like you're a conduit of something greater than you and it's just coming through you and you're in that flow. And in Sanskrit, they call it kriya, which is boundless action by the universe. You're moving towards your dharma, your soul's purpose. That's that energy really of channeling. And I think so often we think, oh, it needs to be in this container or in the monastery. So if it's not that, that must not be channeling. But even just watching a saxophonist on the street, they're often channeling. And I remember hearing the story about Michael Jackson, and he would call his manager in the middle of the night and be like, we need to get to the studio right now. And the manager would be like, it's 1 a.m. We can't get to the studio. And he's like, we need to record a song because if we don't record it tonight, Prince will. And it's such a beautiful example of that channeling, that they're both channeling from the same source and they're realizing they're getting the same melodies even coming through them.
And I've always loved that about creativity, the idea that you don't act upon will go to someone else. And that's why when you are a visionary and you're used to the ideas, you can let a lot of them go. They go into the pot of your view, your way of thinking, but they aren't necessarily going to be yours to act on. And funnily enough, my guides explained to me that they got me first through music. So at the age of 21, I started hearing melodies in my head, fully formed. And I'd always loved music. I'd always sung, but I never ever thought I would be a composer. And at the age of 21, when that happened, I was absolutely transfixed. It changed the whole course of what I wanted to do with my life. And I began serving, being a singer-songwriter. And for me, those were always very magical experiences. And if I didn't capture them when I heard them, if I didn't record it and make some notes and write down some chords, it would be gone. And so it's a bit like listening out to universal radio to see if you can catch something.
Absolutely. So how can we start to deliberately channel? Not like, maybe it's going to happen, maybe it's not, but to actually set an intention that right now I want to do channeled writing or music or even a coaching session. How can we step into that energy?
Well, the reason that I've always advised people to write it down is something that my guides told me many years ago. They said that when you write down what you are connecting to in your higher mind, in your higher self, or your guides, two things happen that are different to just hearing it in your head while you're having an intuitive conversation or a visionary conversation with yourself. Number one, you bring this information down through your body. So you're actually making it real and bringing it onto earth. So for example, if I were walking along today and I was going through some stuff in my mind and I just asked, I want higher guidance on this. Will my soul give me a wider, broader picture on this? And your soul pops in and goes, you've already done all the work. You're overthinking it. And everything is there in front of you. All you need to do now is practice relaxing for a few days and notice when you get tense. I'm probably not going to remember that in 2 or 3 days. Like I probably won't. In the moment, I'll have a bit of euphoric release and I'll go, oh yeah, that feels great. Or I may share it with you if I chat to you an hour later, but I'm probably not going to remember that. So the writing it down lets you track back and start to have this very physicalized relationship with the voice of your soul, your higher self, your guides. So you can essentially be a scientist and study not only what comes through, but the effect of it. A bit like you said, you'll often go back to my energy updates a month later. I have that too. If intuitive information that has come through me or someone else, if I have a recording of it, months later, it makes more sense. And I can see how that energy pattern played out. So that's the first reason to write it down. But the second reason, if you think about it, is you are bringing it through the body and you are physicalizing it. This is what my guides said. They said, you can forever think of it as abstract if you just have a brief conversation with us that then floats off and it's gone. But if you actually let it come through your body and then your eyes have to read this back, a very powerful effect happens on you. It's why I've seen so many people do this for the first time and then burst into tears. And usually they're bursting into tears at what they've written because there's a level of love, compassion, or a feeling of remembrance of home that they are not used to. And so it has a very powerful rewiring effect on the body if you practice channeling as a writing exercise and do it consistently. So as comfortably as you wish. Some people might want to do it every day, but for others that might be too much. But if you committed to, say, 2 days a week, sitting down for 5 minutes, writing, what does my soul or higher self or whatever word you feel to insert there want to tell me today? And not only let these messages come through, but give it a month and see what happens to your frequency, your mood, and your way of seeing the world as that month goes on. And also look back at past messages. And for me, what it did, because I spent many, many months privately speaking to my guides before I did a free reading for any friend, which was how I really got started, was it gave me an opportunity to calibrate to the frequency and get a little bit used to this new way of seeing the world. But if you leave it up here in the ethers of the mind, and it's easy for it to remain ephemeral. So there's something very powerful about grounding your channeling through a physicalized written practice.
I love that so much because when we write something down, it's the active embodiment. We're bringing it through our body and into the physical. And like you said, that you're then reading it and that's creating like a circular energy with that expression rather than it just like coming from up and then just sort of dissecting out. So that, and even with journaling, like sometimes you're like, I don't really want to journal. I already know what I think. And then you start journaling and then it's all of the stuff came out that you would have just maybe had a little thread of, but you wouldn't have pulled the thread and seen the entire, balloon of emotions and ideas and understanding that would have come on the other end.
And isn't that so true? Because the effect of what our journaling or our channeling has on us is the work. So you might think, oh, well, I sat down and channeled today, but I would argue that the actual energetic movement then happens in the next 24 to 72 hours. Because if we write something that taps on a small, limited part of us that wants to let go, that wants to evolve, it's having that in writing that makes that part of you loosen its grip a little, or start to heal, or start to expand, and start to recognize you're allowed to become something greater. So for me, that has always been the power of the effect of channeling on us. It almost sets in motion a chemical and an alchemical reaction in us to guide us to continual transformation into being the most expanded that we can be at that moment on that day.
And are there any practices that you do to get into a channeled state? I mean, I know right now for you, it's we watch it happen right there on camera, but what practices have helped you?
Well, a couple of I'll tell you what was big for me. Crystals. I don't have my usual channeling crystal here right now, but I was not somebody who was attracted to crystals. I mean, I'd seen them in the stores and I knew people who loved them, and I was just like, oh, okay. The minute I started channeling crystals, and it was holding a crystal in my hand, and they said it helps you conduct the crystalline energy, because when we go back to our soul, there is a crystalline nature to our energy that we have not really been trained to perceive or live from as human beings in our conditioned culture at this moment in time. So for me, it was having a tool like a crystal. It was also making sure that my state was as open as it could be. And even today, if I'm doing a big broadcast, I will put David Pramal and Maten's music on, or I will put on music that has to me a very high frequency and a space, so that my energy field, my body, my mind starts to open out a little bit. It makes the act of surrender less intense. I'm used to surrendering with channeling. I'm used to letting my logical mind and my Li mind get out the way so that the Z's can have that faculty. I'm not in a trance. I am able to hear what's going on. And if I wanted to at any moment, I could stop it. But there is a level of surrender. So I would say anything that helps you get into that surrendered state. And for some people, it might be a 10-minute, 20-minute meditation. But, one of the things I'm possibly proudest of with the strangeness of how it happened to me is that I can be an advocate out there for, I was sitting on the subway with lots of negative thoughts in my head, and this happened to me. And my belief system told me that shouldn't have even been possible. My belief system told me I should have been on an Ayurvedic cleanse for 15 years before that could have happened. So I think it's sometimes really important for us to recognize that the connection we can have to spirit can be like that and doesn't require a lot of ceremony and paraphernalia a lot of the time. However, at the beginning, certainly, and if it makes you feel more comfortable, I would say creating as high vibe a space as you can in yourself and your environment would be great.
I've noticed that for me too. Sometimes I record solo casts and I'll channel on there, and the most potent ones are never the ones I prepared for. They're when I'm just was on a walk, and then it's this energy. For me, it's often when I'm moving. So I've noticed that pattern. It's like after I did yoga or ecstatic dance or walked outside and my body's just moving. And then the thoughts start to fade out and you start to connect to something a little greater. And then for me, I'm very cognizant that it's just flood of ideas coming through. And it's almost so fast that I need to just record myself. Otherwise, I'm just not going to be able to, I'll miss that cloud. So what I started doing this 5 years ago is I would just get on my microphone and just speak out the transmission that was coming through. And I never knew where it would take me. I never even really knew what the point of it was. And it's always, and for me, I think also showing up and actually recording myself makes me commit to it more as well. Then sometimes you're just even if you're journaling, then you get distracted or you're just ego thoughts come in and you go off. So for me, just verbally saying it and letting that transmission out, and people can feel the difference when I'm like Sahara and like highest self channel Sahara. And there's a frequency difference, the texture of the voice, the quality, the quality of, it's not even what I'm saying. It's the energy around it. And it's so and then I can sometimes feel when the channel is done and it's like, okay, this is done. Like time for a snack.
Yeah, it's so true. Everything you just described. And I think the surrender to it is actually possibly the biggest learning. Or the biggest adaptation that I think we have to make. Like it's understanding what that surrender state is. So for example, for me, I can often, not all the time, but right before a very powerful channeled recording or broadcast, I can almost feel like I'm going to fall asleep, which feels very inconvenient 15 minutes before I'm about to get on camera and really use all my energy to summon this thing. But I've started to understand, oh, this is a sign, like the fact that I want to literally fall asleep 15 minutes before we start. That's one of the signs for me that the state is coming in a certain way. And so I think that's why practicing with channeling or anything higher self related, I think the first thing you learn is to let go of control and surrender in a way that's so useful for your life in other ways, because I'm now so used to not knowing what's coming or preparing for the unexpected that it's become a muscle for me. But for example, initiation, which is a channeled mystery school that we did for the first time last year, they said, we want to do a mystery school. You're not going to tell anybody what it is before. We're not going to tell you what it is before, but we want to have these positions of time where we can transmit for 90 minutes and then you're going to help people reorganize it in the days in between with a video that you help them calibrate. So we're about to do that again. And I already have cleared my schedule in the days around those broadcasts, particularly the first two, because it can kind of knock you a little bit and you never quite know what's coming. But like you said, when it's coming, you have a choice, and that's often to grab pen and paper, grab the recorder, and you learn, I think, the rhythm of which ones are non-negotiable and which ones can you choose to let go and go, no, I don't feel like I want to go to the recorder right now. This one's just for me. So it's an interesting dance, isn't it?
Totally. Yes. I have had some that I've recorded and I'm like, yeah, I feel like this is just for me right now. And it's not for everyone. And I think the only way we can know that difference is to get in the practice of action, of doing it and re-listening to it and from a different state of consciousness. And I think for me too, like you can feel truth, like it has a certain resonance to it and we can feel it in other people. Like when someone's just saying something and you just can feel it in your bones to be true. And that's how I know when I'm channeling, when I feel that same essence coming from the words.
And that's beautiful, isn't it? You know, people often said to me at the beginning, were you scared when you met your guides? And I said, no, they felt like home immediately. What I was scared about was other people's reactions because I was not a fool. I was very clear that this was certainly 23 years ago. This was a little out there. To many people, it still is today. I feel there is a bit less stigma, a bit less fear, and also there seems to be more of an alignment for people now because as consciousness is raising on the planet, more and more people are having unexplainable intuitive experiences. So channeling as one aspect of our doorway to spirituality just gets a little bit more normalized as time goes on, even if it's something you never want to do or, to me, it's just one of the many doorways we have to the spirit realm.
Yes, it's been the biggest game changer of my life. So that's why I'm so excited to have people read your new book, Conversations with the Z's, that I have here, because this book is the first of many that you have coming out that are the transmissions straight from your conversations or the conversations that have come through you with, I believe she's a psychologist with the Z's. So can you share with us, what did that look like for you? Were you just channeling and just open and she was asking you any questions? Did you know the questions that were coming? Great question.
So Diana Edwards is a psychotherapist, and she and I met around 5 years ago, back when I was still doing private sessions. She came to me for a private session. And at the end of the session, she said to me, I never go to other people for private sessions, but Spirit told me I had to come to you. She's very spiritually learned. And so that began a really good friendship for the two of us that just kept blooming and growing year on year. So last November, because Diana had had some fascinating conversations with the Z's privately, she had asked, and this wasn't me working for her, this was within our friendship, the two of us wondering about certain things in the world, and Diana saying, can I speak to them and ask this, and I'll also ask some things for you. And so there was this ease around that relationship, and she had a very good rapport with them. They had a very good rapport with her. I have a members community called The Portal, and every month one of the things they get is a new MP3 recording from me that was often channeled. Sometimes not, but often channeled. And I said to Diana, would you mind doing some conversations with me for my members community? I think it could be really interesting. You ask great questions. It will give them a different way of experiencing the information than if the Z's just monologue. And she said yes. We did 2 recordings in the first day where we were sat at her home, and I was in an armchair, she was in an armchair. We had the mic set up, and literally there wasn't really much pre-conversation. I basically told Diana, leave me out of it. I said, I don't want to know because she wanted to run things by me. And I said, no, because if you start running it by me, I'll start hearing them. So we learned pretty early on that she's going to take care of the questions, and that's her job. So we did these 2 recordings in one day, about 75 minutes each. That's about the max really I can do in a day without it burning me out too much. And at the end of that day, I went back to the guest house where I was staying, and I literally heard, boom, this is a book series. And I was like, I was like, oh, no, I had no plans to do another book. And, you may know, creating a book takes a lot of time. Even when you're taking audio and turning it into a book, it's a lot of work. And they were like, this is a book series. This is the beginning. There definitely will be 8, but there could be 29. It all depends on you and Diana and your willing. And that was kind of it. I went back to Diana the next day and went, look, this is what they told me last night. And so we literally got a map of all of the topics for the first 8 to 10 books. I think we have the map for. And we've just finished recording for book 3, and we'll be finishing the recordings for book 4 early next year. And currently the books are slated to come out next May 2023 and then January 2024 for book 3. We've just done reincarnation and karma, which was fascinating for book 3. And then we're doing the power of death, dying and grief as book 4, which even though that sounds heavy, that's possibly our favorite so far because what's been happening in that one is amazing. So the audible versions are the original conversations. I didn't want to narrate the channel. I thought, no, let's let the audible be the actual audio. So my Portal members community, they got the audio like 7 months ago. But for anybody only coming to the books now, if they want to hear the actual Z's talking to Diana in the moment that it all happened, that's what the audio version does.
So in my own spiritual journey of really honoring the sacred feminine energy within me, I realized that we're not all the same and we all have different pathways that we can take that I put together in creating 5 archetypes, which I call the rose gold goddess archetypes. They are the embodiment queen, the womb whisperer, the intuitive oracle, the expressionista, and the joy priestess. And I've put together a free quiz so you can find out what your unique combination are. So the embodiment queen is the person who's always in her body, dancing, moving, very connected to her nervous system. The womb whisperer always knows where she's at in her menstrual cycle and probably has a yoni steamer in her bathroom. The intuitive oracle has 3 oracle card decks on them, a pendulum, and knows about their past lives. The expressionista is creating art through everything, through singing, dancing, writing poetry. Everything for her is an opportunity to create art. And then we've got the joy priestess who wants to laugh, dance, and not take herself super seriously. You can find her doing karaoke at an improv class or twerking it on the dance floor. You can guess which one I am. So you can head over to rggquiz.com to learn what your unique rose gold goddess archetype is. Again, that's rggquiz.com, and you can find that link in the show notes. And I've created custom graphics that you get in your results so you can share which rose gold goddess archetype you are. I'm super excited to see. That is amazing. And there were so many gems in the book. So I would love to ask you, you talk about the new human soul and how we're shifting. What does that mean? What is the new human soul? How is it different than the old human soul?
Yeah. And again, this was a question I had to ask when they gave me that title. And they basically said, because of the way that consciousness is changing on the planet, even though many of you are still wrangling with and wrestling with parts of the old world that haven't yet transformed, you are becoming the new human soul. And so they gave us the headline, this book is a blueprint for the energetics of the new human soul. And what they're implying is that in a way, they're speaking to us from our future, which I think channeling often does. They're basically saying that what we're describing to you in this book is a way of seeing the world that many of you are becoming, but you have never been before, certainly not at this time in history. And they do say that what's actually activating on an ancient level right now, you have to go back a little over 10,000 years ago to get back to a place on the planet where evolution wasn't clamped. They say that a little over 10,000 years ago, things got clamped energetically on the planet and it limited human potential. So it's not to say we haven't had innovation and growth. Of course we have. But they say we're at a point now where they've spoken about crystalline energy inside the earth. They've also referred to pyramids in the earth that exist that we don't know about or can't see, that are coming online. And so they say often when you think of higher consciousness, many of you go up and you think, oh, it's all up there. And they say, if you're really curious about where your biggest transformations are coming from, look down. And they say those of you who are in tune will feel the vibrations of the earth changing and reverberating from within. And that moves up through our bodies, which is why so many of us go through, quite major healing moments now. I mean, I don't know about you, but I think, wow, in a week now, I can go through the kind of thing that a decade ago might have taken me a year. That's how fast the cycles of evolution and transformation move through you if it's something you're already open to and available for. I think that's also why many people are having very painful or difficult awakenings right now, because we're being asked to remember who we are at a bigger level than the story of humanity we've been told that we are. And I'm always nervous to say that out loud. The Z's are not. They say things like that all the time. The reason I'm always hesitant to say it is I think one of the things we have to be careful of as a society, and I'm sure you've seen this trend in the last few years too, certain people can take that information and they want to go to war with the planet. They want to go to war with the system. They want to go to war with the ones who are doing that to us. And the Z's say, be very careful about getting into any kind of stance. You were born into this time and you knew exactly what you were putting yourself into when you incarnated. And even though for some of you, it can be a bit of a shock to see how certain things are controlled or manipulated on the planet, that control and manipulation has been around for thousands and thousands of years, but now it can't hide anymore. And we're learning to see it more. So they say, by all means, grieve. By all means, be in shock. By all means, feel upset for a while. But they say, do not let that feeling become your weapon that you try and target against some villain you can't see. Because they say that will not help you, with the caveat that there are, of course, certain freedom fighters on the planet who we may never know or see or hear of, who are right now trying to dismantle certain things that are in place that might be holding our evolution back. But unless you're wired that way and that's your role this time around, it's important to remember to be with the evolution of the planet and not just get seduced into the dissolution of things, because that's very much the story that we are sold. If you look at our mass media, how many happy transformational stories are we being told every day? So there's definitely a vibrational issue there. So it's about just being very mindful and open to it all, but here for the change. And they say that's what the new human soul is. And that's what many of us have either already become or are becoming or are deepening with.
I feel that wholeheartedly. And I know so many people are awakening to that right now, of awakening to, the mainstream media is not giving us the full news, and the ways that social media is even using our emotionality to control us and to keep us hooked. And I think a lot of us, especially after 2020, had the realization that me being in sadness all the time is not actually what's going to change the world, but me tapping into what my highest form of joy is, because that's the way I will truly be able to be of service in a sustainable way. And I know the Z's shared in the book that laughing is so powerful, and in fact, 5 times more powerful of a release than crying, which when I read that, I was like, I've always, because I take improv and I just love making funny skits and things like that. It's such a huge part of who I am. And I just feel the energetic shift. So can you speak a little bit more about the medicine of laughter?
When I was going to all of my self-development workshops in my early 20s and trying to kind of recover myself from just the way I had, I guess, reacted to life or defended against life, because I, like many intuitives and sensitives, I didn't understand myself. No one had given me a framework for that. So I had turned it on myself. I so envied the people who could cry all the time. You only had to tell them one sad story or get them to and they would just burst into tears, because I love the experience of crying. I think it's very cathartic. But what I could do was laugh, and not laugh from a place of defense or denial. What happened for me at some of those workshops is I would almost get into a bliss state that I couldn't stop, which was very different to the way I felt in much of my daily life. So I was like, well, this is interesting. There's this crack here, and this light can come through, and I wonder how I can maintain that more. So the Z's have talked a lot about how when we laugh, it really raises our vibration. And the way I understood that when I first heard them say that a few years ago, it made me understand why I always called stand-up comedians master healers, because they are conducting the thoughts and feelings of a group of people in a room or on the other side of a screen. And they are putting a finger on the things that we think, or the shame that we have, or the guilt, or the part of ourselves we're not proud of. And they're allowing us to acknowledge it, laugh with it, move with it. And of course, it doesn't mean you will resonate with every comedian, just like you might go to 6 therapists or healers before you find the right one for you. That's why there are so many of us here, because we all need things slightly differently. But for me, hearing that from the Z's, and I loved that it came out in these conversations, because I think it's just a reminder that I know for me, the little I understood about my body and about my energy system growing up, it was shocking. And the more I continually understand about things we can do, or experiences we can create or cultivate in ourselves that raise our vibration, the more I'm blown away. So laughter is very good for the soul. And like you, I came from an improvisation background, which I always credit with my ability to surrender to the moment, and how I think I was prepped for channeling, because in improvisation, you're always having to embody a very fluid energy with another person, and you never know what's coming. But yeah, laughter is just joy in that scenario, or in any scenario.
Yeah, improv is such a spiritual practice, because you have to be so present, so connected with that person, and allowing whatever is meant to come through at the time without any pre-planning. I mean, you truly are channeling. You're channeling different characters at the time and letting the story unfold. So it's such a beautiful example of life.
So true. So true.
So in the book, you also talk about dreams and sometimes the meanings of them. So how can, I feel like sometimes we have dreams and we look into them in a very literal way. How can we tune into what the energetics are behind our dreams?
So the Z's have said, and they've said this for many years, my first book, Energy Speaks, there's a whole chapter on the power of sleep and what happens to us when we're asleep. And in that, they said the only difference between a corpse and a sleeping person is a pulse. And what they mean by that is that when we die, when we sleep, that was a Freudian slip. When we sleep, we essentially leave, our soul leaves our body for a while, and most of us hover a little above and around it. So it's almost like a practice death in a way. But because we leave our, shall we say, our wired consciousness, and our soul is able to tweak certain things in us, they say that dreams and the dream state are used to rewire us, directed by us. It's not that something else is doing something to us, but they say you will use dreams in a variety of ways. You will use it to help rebalance or reset something that's going on in your life that day or that week. So that's why many of us can, wake up and go, oh my God, I had such a stress dream. And I was, standing on a stage with no clothes on, and I was told to sing, and I was terrified. And then you go, oh yeah, and I'm giving that huge presentation at work on Friday, and I'm really nervous about it. So you can find the parallel. Other times the dream won't really make any sense. And they say you can be clearing things from other lifetimes, other timelines. And the one thing they did say, which I took to heart, and I needed to hear it, they said some of you get very annoyed if you wake up and you've had a nightmare, and you'll get very upset about the fact this nightmare happened to you. And they said, you shouldn't, because you never know what that nightmare just saved you in real life. So whatever you just processed in that nightmare, you now don't have to play out in your earthly daily life. So they said, your dreams are a place that and I think most people will attest to this, we release them quite quickly. So even if you remember a strong dream and it's quite vivid at first, usually by 5 p.m. that day, you aren't walking around feeling like you're in that nightmare anymore. It's to some degree, it's left your body. And so that to me has always been a very accurate fit with their description that the dream we may perceive we're having in this body is actually taking place outside our body. And it's just that there's a line between our body and our soul, but the dream is happening at a higher and an outer level. So to me, that's always made sense as to why we aren't left with traumas or hangovers energetically or emotionally for very long after a dream is over.
So would you say that when we dream, we're clearing karma?
I couldn't say that because I know from hearing the Z's talk about it, they say there are multiple things going on at once. So it could be karma from something prior, something former. The other thing they say that we misunderstand about karma is we make it also personal. And they say all of you tend to think of your own personal life, your own personal mission, your own personal themes. But they said the minute you are born into this planet, you are born into a collective energy template and a collective karmic load, if you like. And so our own personal lives, even though we may see them as very individual, they are highly influenced by where we live, by when we were born, by the current energy map of this planet and humanity at this time in history. So you can clear karma for the planet, for the world, for others that may not be anything to do with you. They have said that sometimes you'll be walking through a forest and all of a sudden you feel like you're a Viking warrior and you have this whole action replay and you're like, whoa, that must have been my past life. And they say, no, sometimes you tap into energy streams and energy ley lines that still exist from the ancestral human energy because it's useful for you to A, contribute to clearing that, or B, it also activates something in you that is going to be useful for you for your life, to just feel like a warrior for a moment. So the way they have, I guess, trained me to see things is far more fluid than I used to believe when I saw it in a slightly more linear fashion. So I guess in answer to your question, it could be true that you're clearing karma, but it could also be that you are creating space for something in your future that has not yet played out. But the nightmare that you go through that helps you release some fear means that when you come to that choice point in 4 days, you won't choose from a place of fear and say, no, I can't move to Miami. You'll choose from a place of openness and joy and fearlessness. And even though you're a bit hesitant, you'll go, I am going to move to Miami, and you'll move into it. But that nightmare may have been part of the reconfiguration of your energy field to allow you to walk the higher path.
Yes, it's almost like it's allowing the buildup of that energy to be just released a little bit, and then also giving you a playground to act out that thing before it actually happens in your life. So when you give that speech, it's not the first time you're kind of giving a speech, but you got to play it out in your dream. Would you say that when we're dreaming, we are astral projecting as well? Or does it tend to be that we are just hovering around the body and it's more happening? Like, is it happening in our minds, do the Z's say, or are we going to these time-space realities?
No, they actually say that, that there is a tether still to the body and the mind. But actually, if we could see ourselves when we are asleep and when we are dreaming, we are literally hovering 6 to 10 feet above our body. And when we die, what happens is you cross through that kind of 12-foot above the body bridge. That's how they've given it to me in terms of measurements. So that's how I've come to understand it. But they say that when we die, usually we will hover above the body around a 12-feet period for anything from an hour to a day or two, depending on who the individual is, whether or not they need to stay close to their physical body because of people around them that they need to stay close with. It depends on your processing time. And it's interesting because we're halfway through the death and dying conversations right now. So I'm beginning to get a few sneak peeks about how that's seen. But no, the implication is, I guess, are we astral projecting? Well, I would say we're projecting outside this body and this gravity of our consciousness that we have when we're awake. They have never said that we are going as far as the astral plane, but that we're kind of bridging between the two. Fascinating.
And have the Z's delivered you any information on how we can recall our past lives?
Well, I've been channeling for a long time now, and I feel like about 18 to 14 years ago, and I mean publicly for people, I've been channeling for 18 years. There was a lot that they would talk about with past lives, and they would say that we reclaim our power as we go through life lessons. So for example, let's say you are going through a lot of anxiety right now because let's say you work in a job where you're going for a promotion and you're not sure you'll get it. You hope you will. You're giving it your best shot. It feels like you want to move in that direction, but some of the power is out of your hands. They would argue that those are moments where we get to reclaim past parts of ourselves and reclaim past parts of our power, and that our life is constantly setting us up for that. However, they say the slight misperception that we sometimes make is we literally think that we're getting back the personality from that time. But they say the personality can't exist from that time in the way your personality exists now, because your personality is made up of all of the pieces of this current history. But they do say the alignment to certain skills, abilities, ways that you might be wired psychically and emotionally, those things can reactivate as you re-include it and bring it all back in. And what I noticed for myself, I don't know if this is true for you, Sahara, or anyone listening, I noticed there was a period in my evolution where past lives were very prevalent, and I was having lots of experiences and lots of and I would really feel them as they were happening. But then I think the more my own multidimensional way of living, seeing, and perceiving the world has grown, it's hard to stay fixed in a past life moment. It just becomes, oh, okay, cool, that's done. And now I'm back to this wider view. But it almost feels like, for me anyway, I had to reclaim certain past life powers, abilities, or clear or heal some wounds in order to be able to progress to that next place of a wider seeing and perceiving of reality.
It's been exactly like that for me as well. Almost like different soul contracts I've had with different lifetimes of kind of uncompleted business from those lives. So for example, the lifetime that I was channeling ancient Ayurvedic text in India as a sadhu there. And then in this lifetime, I would literally just look out the window and start writing about, Ayurveda, specific Sanskrit terms that I never learned in this lifetime. Gunas, subgunas, like these are things that I can't just make up. And then they were all being fact checked because they were going in the book Idiot's Guide to Ayurveda, which was like the textbook for American people to learn about Ayurveda. And I just knew I couldn't have just figured this out from nothing. It's channeled from something beyond me. And I was running that channel for like 7 years, just diving into Ayurveda and speaking about it. And then I could feel when it was complete. and different lifetimes were meant for me to be played out, such as being an African drummer and dancer, such as being a medicine woman. And, then I step into this other contract and another one. But now for me, it's less about that. I think a lot of those, again, maybe who knows, I'll like step into a whole other portal soon. But right now it feels more like I can feel myself in those different lifetimes, but it's not as like prevalent of like finishing up the business, because I think a lot of the karma from that has completed.
That makes so much sense. And I'm with you too. Who knows? Next month, I might be in a whole, I don't know. But I love what you said about all of that. And it's interesting too, isn't it? Because I also have come to, in a way, have a very light touch around all of that stuff. But if I hadn't had a very involved touch with all of that stuff, I would never have got to here. So I think that's why all of our stages have to be honored. And I think that's where any kind of spiritual teaching that has dogma or rules can be very dangerous. Because it is not one rule fits all, and it is not one size fits all. We're all different. We're all at different stages. So I think there has to be a lot of grace around any kind of spiritual evolution with yourself first. And then you and I touched on this right before we started this conversation. The thing that we have both witnessed working in this field, which is our programmed tendency to give our power away to something other than ourselves when it comes to spirit. We can do that with gurus, teachers, workshops, books, drugs, whatever it is that you see as your opening. There can be a tendency to almost deify or worship that, which to me is a bit of a hangover from the way that we've been programmed as a culture and the separation that most of us were trained into around our connection to spirit. And one of the things the Z's are always saying is, you can't not be connected to spirit, because if you're in the body and you're alive, even if you can't see it or perceive it, there is spiritual energy all around you. And what they say is this is the time where more of us than ever before on the planet are remembering that truth, finding new ways to bring that truth through, benefiting from that truth, and pioneering a new world where that truth can be included rather than edited out.
Absolutely. And for our last question here, we speak a lot about living your dharma, your soul's purpose. What wisdom do the Z's have about tuning into what our soul's expression really is like for us and how that's meant to show up in the world?
Well, it's an interesting question. I could answer it many ways, but I'm just going to go with what comes to me first. They are passionate about telling us how good it is to be a human being. And trust me, there have been some dark nights of the soul in my life, and I'm sure many of your listeners and viewers have gone through that too, where you're like, I don't want to be here. Why am I here? This is too painful. This is too much suffering. I had a couple of rounds, couple of years in my life at different times that felt like that. But they're very adamant that we are here to not only expand as much as we can and experience as much as we can. And by the way, a huge vital piece of expansion is contraction. So for example, if we go through this incredible week, it's going to be quite normal that the following week you might suddenly have some fear come up, or some shyness or some uncomfortableness come up inside you, because you just expanded your energy field in such a way that if you aren't yet used to that dance, the ping back can feel quite dramatic. It's why many people go to workshops and come away feeling really high, and then a week later they're like, oh my God, I've lost it, and now I'm really sad again. And it's like, no, if you don't think you lost it, but you recognize that you held that vibration for as long as you can, and now your body, your soul wants to help you alleviate some of the gunk in the basement. And in order to do that, you're going to have to look at it. You're going to have to feel it. Something in your life is going to have to trigger you into it. It's not that you lost the other state. It's that the other state is now going to make these lower parts of you feel a bit more painful, a bit more pronounced, and a bit more foreign to where you're going, because you're going to reanimate that energy. You're going to re-illuminate it from inside, and it's no longer going to have to be an angry or a sad wound that's holding you in place from your potential. So they love telling people, they say, if you don't know why you're here and you think you've got dropped off on the wrong planet, we want to remind you that it's very easy to die. They say there are so many ways you can die and be taken off this planet like that. And that if you are not meant to be on this planet anymore, you will create that for yourself. So if you're still here, get curious about how you can shift your focus to experience more of what you want to. Fill in the blank. Joy, peace, love, excitement, passion, whatever you feel is most missing for you. And usually we start with what's most missing. We're like, God, I haven't felt peace for 4 years and I'm constantly stressed. Okay, great. Walk towards peace, really work on cultivating peace. And then gradually some of the grace, the kind of high notes like joy or excitement, that can come later. But if peace is your biggest missing element, make this your year of peace and be willing to let it suck for a while. You know, it's like, okay, well, this year I've promised myself I will know peace. And I'm really mad about giving myself that intention because what if I, let all your stuff fly around, but don't try and do it alone. Hold the intention, put support in place to help you get there, whether it's working with coaches and mentors, whether it's taking yourself to places and changing your habits and your patterns in a way that that can come in. The Z's say that's why we're here. And that for us, finding our most expanded place is very much personal, but also collective. Because as we change our energy field, we have an effect on the outside world. So they say too many of you have got savior ideas. You think you're here to save the world. And they say none of you are here to save the world. The world does not need saving by you. The world was here before you got here. The world will be here after you've gone. Come in and offer something to this world and offer something to yourself. And I know for me, who like many, empaths and sensitives had the idea that the world needed to be fixed or people needed to be fixed. And then one day it's like, oh, I need to be fixed. Oh, I get it. I finally brought it home. So I think that their message is just so, I want to say relentless and quite, sometimes quite, strident. Like they're like, no. You're the one who's going to figure out how to bring joy into your life. And they're very compassionate to circumstances. They say, if you recognize that all the odds are against you right now in the place you're living, in the relationship you're in the situation or the health that you find yourself in, then start small and don't certainly don't beat yourself up for where you find yourself, but give yourself a year to go, I have the power to ask the universe to support me to create this vibrational shift. And so the expression that they refer to is quite personal to each of us. Sahara, maybe you relate to this, but I didn't know how much I would value the feeling of peace when I was in my 20s. And now in my 40s, I'm like, oh, peace is great. Like in my 20s, it was all about excitement or the high or, because I guess I needed something so big to counterbalance my lower point. But these days, even on a more stressful day for me or a more challenging day for me, I'm really grateful that I do know how to bring myself back to a place. And I've got trees outside my window where I just go, oh, wow, that is miraculous. And I can really get there. Even if I have to just work a little bit to get there. And so to me, that is one of the gifts of life, not being so consumed by what you're in reaction to or in action with, that you can't just pull back and look at this planet and go, regardless of what you think about various things in the world that are going on right now, this place is pretty miraculous. And for me, that has been a level of awareness and expression that I don't know I knew I should crave in my 20s, but it's something that has unfolded for me that I'm beyond grateful for, because that's irreplaceable and invaluable.
Yes. Tuning into that one word of what we are here to embody and letting that be our soul's purpose. So thank you so much for sharing all of your potent wisdom with us today. I so deeply appreciated everything that you shared. And I'm so excited for people to read Conversations with the Z's and tune into all of your forecasts. So where can people get the book and connect with you further?
Well, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for holding space and forum, you and your community, for these kinds of conversations. I know it always uplifts me to have this kind of conscious conversation. So yeah, thank you for the work you're doing to promote and generate that. If you go to my website, leeharrisenergy.com, You will find everything there. I also have a site for the music, which is leeharrismusic.com. But leeharrisenergy.com will connect you to everything. And we have a channeled mystery school that's running through the end of November, and everything is available as a replay. So if you're watching this in November, it's called Initiation, if you felt like joining and taking that journey. And yeah, the book and the Audible book are on Amazon and all good booksellers. And yeah, thank you so much for having me, Sahara.
Well, thank you again for being here today. I invite you now to just connect to how you feel after being part of this conversation with us. Noticing any shifts that you experienced. Maybe you feel a little bit softer, more open, intuitive, tender. And just taking a deep breath and exhaling out, allowing all activations to really land, and knowing that more downloads will continue to fall through now that you've opened yourself up to these new possibilities through this conversation. It's very common to notice synchronicities after this. So I want to thank you for being open to types of conversations like this. It's not every day that we get to talk about channeling. For many people, there are judgments. So I just want to acknowledge you for being here and thank you for being part of this community. I'm so deeply grateful for each and every one of you. And I'm so excited to be connecting more with in-person workshops. So if you loved this episode, I would love to give you a gift for leaving a review. Leaving a review really helps the podcast reach more people. And as a special thank you, I will send you my womb meditation. Now, this is a meditation to connect to your divine feminine energy. Your womb, whether you have a physical womb or not, is really the channel between the seen and unseen realms. It is our birthing portal of creativity, of purpose, of inspiration, and of life. So this meditation allows you to connect to your sacred womb space so you can hear her answers. So just leave a review for the podcast over on the iTunes store. Take a screenshot before you hit that submit button and email it over to me at sahara@iamsahararose.com. Again, that's Sahara, Sahara, @iamsahararose.com. And you can find that email in the show notes. Email it over to me and I will email you back my free womb meditation. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you on the next episode. Namaste.